Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? That's a good question, isn't it? And what do I mean by that? I don't know. I went walking today in the neighborhood and I saw a guy who was walking his dog, not around anybody, and he had on two MASKs. Yeah. I mean, what can you do with these people? Let's let them go. Let them get bacterial pneumonia or whatever. Let them get VACCINES. You know, just let them get whatever they need to get. Let them do whatever they need to do. It's, when you look around and you see people and you see a lot of these people, it's very difficult. Um, but we have to move on and we have to take care of ourselves. And it's very difficult. I want, but that's what we need to do. And I, I want to, I don't know if you all remember this story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I really liked reading Scarlet Letter in high school. And he also wrote a book of short stories, or he wrote a bunch of short stories. I don't know if they were compiled into a book during his lifetime, but um, he wrote a story called Young Goodman Brown. And there was a lot of symbolism in Nathaniel Hawthorne. If you've read any of his work, you know that. So, of course, young Goodman Brown was a good man, and he was young. And I don't remember all the details exactly, but I do remember the gist of the story was that he was a preacher, and I believe his wife's name was Faith. And he had this dream one night, and in the dream, or was it real? And I don't know that that was really, I think you can look at it both ways if I remember that correctly. Um, but in the dream or at night, he went into the forest. And there were all these people that were his parishioners. And he went into the forest and he saw them. And they were doing all these things like dancing and, drinking and carousing with each other that they wouldn't normally do and certainly weren't supposed to do in that time and that place. Um, and it forever changed him. He was never quite the same. His wife's name was Faith, and I think that you're left with the question of, will he continue to have faith, his wife, and because she didn't have that experience. I don't think. I'm not sure if she was there. I don't think she was there in reality. She might have been there in the dream. It's just um, it's I'm not sure how exactly that resolved itself, but the idea is, will he continue to have faith in the lowercase uh, f sense of faith in God, faith in himself, after seeing all that in the forest? And will he continue to be a good man? And will he continue to have his wife and be with her? Because now he's had this experience that makes him very different than, she is. Um, so uh, I, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I've been thinking about it in relation to the church I went to. I believe it was the Sunday before Christmas. Yes, and it was the church I grew up in, and it was the church I got married outside of. We got married outside, beside the church, and I went, and at first it seemed somewhat normal. I'm usually, and I may have told you the story, but I want to connect it with young Goodman Brown because it's where my mind's been going. it was almost normal when we got there. Of course, we're always a little late because I'm usually or often a little late. I'm usually a little late, and so everyone had been seated and was seated, and no one really had on an mask, and it was after the service. Of course, there was no singing, there was no choir. Uh, There might have been a little bit of singing, but there was certainly no choir, and it was very strange. I think there was piano music, but it was, it was a really kind of strange and different experience. Uh, and it was the first time I had gone to that church, or maybe to any church, for a service, um, since this tyranny began. And I'm not sure why they had the service inside. I think they've been meeting outside, but I don't know. I'm not sure how that's shaken down. And I just know for that day they were inside. And I saw a lot of people after the service who had on MASKs and MASKs. And I saw a lot of people, and I saw someone who was really like a father to me, is like a father to me in a lot of ways. And I've grown up knowing him, and here he was, and his breathing and was instructed because somebody had told him to do that because he normally does not do that. And I guess they told him that he had to do it, um, to pass out the stuff he was passing out, to everybody. And somehow it's harder for me to see someone like that I know participating in this mask wearing ritual, MASK wearing ritual. That doesn't get us deleted, or get me deleted. Um, but it was harder to see that, I think, especially in church, especially in a church that I love, um, than it was to see the guy wearing two MASKs, while walking a dog, because I don't know him. And when I see people who are doing this that I know and love, I don't know why that's harder for me, but it is. And I said this when we were in Montana, uh, and I said it to a girl I met, and we were talking for a little bit, and she said I think she lives in Montana, and she said that she was actually afraid to that she would see her father out one day wearing an MASK, and she could completely relate to what I was saying, really, or pretty much relate to it. She hadn't seen him in that yet, but she was, anxious, worried that that would happen, and that she would see him in that MASK, and it would be really hard for her. So we've all, in that sense, had a young Goodman Brown experience this year of really seeing people that we know and love either, not wanting to see us, very isolated, or wanting to see us only if they or we, cover our nose and mouth. Um, and I was reading this morning in Genesis, I think it was 37 or 38. We're trying to read a chapter every other day or so. And the chapter I was reading, they talked about, I don't remember her name, but they thought that she was a harlot because her face was covered. Isn't that interesting? And of course, they're wanting us to cover our faces. So I think we've all had sort of a young Goodman Brown experience this year, and it will be almost a year in just a couple of weeks, really. A year ago, we were coming back to California from North Carolina, and I remember we got here on a Friday, and I was really, really tired. I'd driven across the country, and I'm so thankful that I went to see my oldest compete in college swimming. It was the first and probably the only time I will get to see him do that, and he really loved that so much. And it was taken away from him, and we're not really sure why, because there hasn't been any good that's come from that. I mean, of course they'll say, "Oh yes, well of course if they had continued swimming, then 100 people would have died by now or whatever." But we're just not seeing that. So, um, in reality, and I think you also think of William Casey. Supposedly, it was attributed to uh, anyway to William Casey, who said, "Well, no, our disinformation program is complete in the United States when everything that Americans believe is false." And I think that was made in the 80s. That's certainly at that time in the 90s. I mean, I think I would have had trouble, maybe even 2 years ago, I would have had trouble understanding what that meant. You know, they're going to lie to us. But now we see that most of the stuff that we're hearing, it seems to be lies in one form or another. So we've all had that young Goodman Brown experience, and we're all going on like he did at the end of the story, where he was changed. And how was that going to affect things? Um, Being that he's seen all of this stuff, these people were in the forest, and they were, kind of going, doing demonic kind of things. There was a sense of that, yeah, like the mask wearing ritual. And how is that going to change him? How is it going to be, when he is preaching, and he's preaching, and he looks out and he sees these people that he's seen, dancing and all of this without clothes. I think, I don't know, there was a lot of weird stuff going on. How is that going to be? You know, you can't unsee it. It's kind of the phrase a lot of people use now. And I don't know how that's going to be. I don't know how it's going to be. We don't know how it was for him, really, and in later years, and we don't know how it's going to be for us. So where do we go from now, from here, and for now? I mean, if you haven't stopped wearing an mask, please stop. Just stop doing that. There are a lot of people who really can benefit from just your not doing that anymore. And I know it's hard. I saw the man in the grocery outlet. I might have said the story the other day, and he was in the grocery outlet, and he turned around and he thanked me for not wearing an mask. Like he really wanted to do it, but even then he kept his on, and I should have just said, "Please take it off," but he was afraid to. I know it seems crazy, but we've been through all of this, and where do we go from now? And what do these experiences and seeing these people participate in these rituals, how does that affect us? I don't know. I don't have any answers for that. But I do know that we can learn. We can learn from Texas. I believe we can learn to prepare, make sure we have uh, backup power. We need to work on that, and backup food and that kind of thing. Um, the irony is that here we were going through North Dakota at, I think, it's -5 degrees outside in January. We went through Illinois, Indiana. We saw a bunch of snow in Montana, and we saw a whole bunch of snow, um, and freezing stuff, but that's sort of expected there. And we usually go through Texas, and last year about this time we were doing that, and it's usually fine, maybe some snow, but now whatever has happened, we just have to ask and pray for those people and help them if you can, and we just have to learn from We don't know exactly why it's happening. I'll bet it's not at all what we've been taught it is or told it is on mainstream media. We don't know what's really happening with all that, or why all this is really happening with power grid and all that. But these demonic people, from what I've read, they actually do let the truth out. That's what they have to do. They have to let people know what they're going to do. But I think not everyone is listening. So those of us who are listening, we've been through a lot psychologically. And I think that we need to take care of ourselves. I think also that God will take care of us if we listen to what he's saying and be still and try to um, think about what's happening with people, what and this Texas thing. I mean, they're blaming all that on storms, and there were storms and ice. I saw some footage from Texas where somewhere around Dallas, and there was just, I think, 100-car pileup. It was really, really sad to watch, and that's not usually the way Texas is. So, is that what's going on? But and then all the power outages that happened in Pakistan about a month ago, and we didn't hear anything about it over here. So, are they just really testing certain areas and which area will be next? So that's one thing to think about. What would happen if you hear something bad, like the Pakistan thing or the Texas thing with power outages? So what can we do to, if that happens where we are? That's one way to move on and to think about things. And also with food. This is a great reset for food. So the people who are planning and funding this, the billionaires, the corporations, and the governments who are working together to destroy a bunch of people. That's really what it seems like. And a lot of people don't want to believe that. But if you're watching, you probably at least open to that. And what's going to happen, um, with all of that food stuff? They want us to eat bugs. They don't want us to eat animals. They want to rewild. They want to move everyone into cities and just take everyone out of the rural areas. And that's been happening for 20 or 30 years. The town I grew up in, Pueblo, had a textile mill that everyone could work at, and a lot of people did work at it, and it's all gone now. It's all gone, and there's no opportunity for that. And that's happening in towns all over, and it's happened because of regulations and policies that were designed in a slower way to kill the economy and to get people out of small towns and rural areas and into big cities where smart cities, you should look into those, where you can be you will be controlled and surveilled a lot all the time. So that's what the planners and funders of this event seem to really want, of these events, seem to really want for us. So we need to plan with that information in mind. So I hope to talk more about this, but I hope it helps. I know it's almost like I have to get right emotionally with this because it's difficult to go out and see people walking dogs with 2 masks on, or you know making one person moved when I came down the sidewalk today, and I said, "Fear not." They had on their demonic mask, so they were probably like, "Hey, where's that from?" Well, it's not from Satan, because Satan is all about fear. So, in many ways, it's a whole lot clearer who's following the demonic path and who's following the godly path. Or at least, you can see, I'm not saying everyone that doesn't wear an mask is a great Christian, but I'm just saying that you can tell one path and the other path. And if somebody's on the demonic path, they may say that they're religious or spiritual or whatever, but whom are they following? And it's become real clear to see that. And one more thing, I put the Liberty. I think I'm going to put the Liberty Fellowship. I think I did that in yesterday's video too, but I'm going to put that in the comments for you to take a look at. It's a great sermon, and one thing he does, I think this was on the video, but one thing that Pastor Chuck Baldwin did was he had his whole congregation, and we've been in that congregation, and it was awesome. There's a lot of energy in that. I felt a lot of Holy Spirit energy in that congregation. And he had them all say very loudly, "You are not alone to us." Because we have the perception that we're alone. But here's the deal, we're not alone. We're not alone because there's so many people. I mean, I was around 30 or 40 people a Sunday night. We had a game night, and no one was wearing an mask, and we had fun, and kids were doing stuff, and the adults were doing stuff, and we just acted like normal people, and it was awesome. And then Saturday night, went to a comedy show, same deal, except more people. I would say probably 60 or 70 people throughout the night. So you may feel alone, but you're not alone. A lot of people, and of those people, I think I probably said this in the other video, but maybe 5 or 6 were wearing MASK, and MASK. So, you're not alone. So I think that's an important thing for you to know. I hope I can still read this. I didn't bring my flashlight and it got dark. Okay. This moment, it's a farce. The great actors, the great poets, the great statesmen, the great painters, the great composers, the great loves. It's a farce, a farce, a farce. History and the recording of it, forget it, forget it. You must begin all over again. Throw all that out, all of them out. You are alone with now. Look at your fingernails, touch your nose, begin. The day flings itself upon you. I'm going to read that one more time. Now that I know what it says. Okay. I've read it before, but it's a little hard to read in the dark. There's a little light, so I'll be okay. This moment, it's a farce. The great actors, the great poets, the great statesmen, the great painters, the great composers, the great loves. It's a farce, a farce, a farce. History and the recording of it, forget it, forget it. You must begin all over again. Throw all that out, all of them out. You are alone with now. Look at your fingernails, touch your nose, begin. The day flings itself upon you. So that's a good poem. um, this moment is what it's called. This moment. And really, that's all we have. We don't have the future. We don't have the past. We just have this moment. So, whatever you need to do to leave the past in the past might be a good thing to do. The Hawaiian forgiveness ritual of I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you is a good thing to memorize and say. Um, it has a Hawaiian name that I don't know how to pronounce, and I'm not going to try to do it right now. But um, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. And the idea is that we love whoever it is that we need to forgive, and we thank them for teaching us the lessons that they taught us. It's hard to do that with psychopaths, and we're all dealing with psychopaths, but we can do it. And I like to believe that God's taken care of us in many ways. And so let's keep connected to that. Okay, well, I hope this helps, and we'll talk a little more about moving on and we'll talk a little more about the emotional stuff. For me, I have to get the emotional stuff right before the other stuff falls into place. And you might can relate to that. And I know that the emotional stuff is difficult. Um, the isolation is difficult. The aloneness is difficult. And I also know, and I'm thankful that I have it better than a lot of people. When I heard that grandma a few weeks ago at the uh, church on the beach that we went to, um, and she talked about how her daughter and son, neither one of them will allow her to come visit until she gets a TEST. Another family to pray for. That's difficult. And we all may be facing something like that someday. So that's why, but we're not alone. There are lots of other people who understand your situation. You may not be able to talk to them right now, but they're there. And of course, God always understands your situation. So I hope this helps. And gosh, it's pretty dark now. I hope you have a wonderful evening.